This is part 2, chapter 1 of 1984. Welcome back. Not that you guys have much of a choice, because I think you need these videos, but a couple of changes that I'm sure you've noticed. Number one, I got new lighting, and by new lighting I mean I went upstairs into our dining room and I stole the lamp that was in there. The videos before were a little bit dark and grainy, and so I'm hoping this helps. And the second thing is, guess what? That's right. So instead of being able to go outside or celebrate in some other way that involves me not being in my basement, that just can't happen. And instead, I'm down here and I'm doing this instead. And it's all good. So what did I want to say? First things first, a little bit more professional this time. I've got some notes for the chapter, just a couple of things. And also I wanted to mention that, as you heard in the opening, I just wanted to reiterate that this is part 2, chapter 1 of 1984. Because, as I've mentioned in a previous video, that 1984 is set up into 3 different parts. Or, as you can see on the PowerPoint, I call them books, book 1, book 2, book 3. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And so this second part that we're transitioning into now has 10 chapters, one of which is about 45 pages long. And so when we get to that point, I'll tell you what we're going to do instead. What else do I have here? I think that's it. I think we'll just get right into it. I've been getting a lot of really good feedback on the videos so far. A lot of you messaging and saying that it's helpful, and so that's good, and I'm happy to hear that. And I'm trying not to make them too long so that you don't fall asleep. But in any case, you can always hit the pause and come back to it later if you feel like I'm starting to drag. This chapter is actually pretty pivotal. So in the entire first part of the novel, Winston doesn't have anybody. I've made that abundantly clear. And so for us now transitioning into part 2, we actually maybe see that he might have somebody on his side. And so we'll have to make that decision for ourselves. But at least Winston is given a little glimmer of hope that is not based on a dream or on some gut feeling, right? He actually has some, what you may argue, some concrete evidence to indicate that somebody's actually on his side. And so we'll see that. And again, so before we really dive into it, just as a reminder, you should have the novel in front of you in case you're adding notes to it, your own notes that you've already taken on the chapter, because I know that you've already read it. And also maybe the PowerPoint in front of you, the course pack in front of you. You have a lot of resources, folks, to get yourself through it. And I'm going to turn this off because I get so distracted by my messages, and that was Mr. O'Soren messaging me, so I'm just going to turn the phone over. So let's get right into it. Part 2, Chapter 1. And immediately the chapter begins with Winston talking about how there is a solitary figure heading towards him in the corridor, who we know is the girl with dark hair, which I've already ruined for you. Her name is Julia. And she's walking towards him. Her arm is in a sling, meaning that she's got a cast on. And as they're walking past each other, she trips and she falls on her arm. And Winston then is kind of caught in this really, really awkward situation. Julia is somebody, of course, that we've been keeping track. She has been kind of suspiciously around him in 4 different places. And the gut feeling that he gets of her is just one of fear. And she's somebody that he's not going to be able to trust. But now, this very vulnerable person has just fallen in front of him, and he really has 2 options. And one of them, of course, is to just step right over her and continue walking and ignore her, or the other thing to do, of course, is to help her up. Because she is human after all, and so he does actually decide to help her. And when he does help her up and grab onto her hand, she slips a piece of paper into his hand, and they have a very sort of brief conversation. And he asks if she's hurt. She says, no, I just gave my wrist a bit of a bang. And she says, thanks, comrade. And he helps her up, and they go their separate ways. And Winston, of course, realizes that he has this piece of paper in his hand. He doesn't know what it is. He's, of course, afraid to open it with all the telescreens around and things like that. He's afraid to open it. So he doesn't know what it says, and immediately going through his mind, he thinks about all of the possible things that it could be. One of the things I think he mentions that he thinks it's like a summons, right? That he's going to be summoned maybe by a tribunal or something like that. In any case, he believes that maybe she is a member of the Thought Police, and now he's been found out. So he has to wait until, of course, the right time when he's going to be able to sort of unravel the piece of paper and figure out what it is that it says. And so there are really kind of 2 ways for Winston to think about this. And number 1 is that it just confirms whatever this piece of paper is. It just confirms that she is not somebody that is to be trusted. Or what could also be a possibility that you can see here up on the PowerPoint is that maybe she can be trusted. Because if she's taken such a big risk in passing him a note in front of a telescreen, mind you, where she has fallen, maybe that indicates that she is trustworthy. So when he gets to his desk at the Ministry of Truth, he unravels the note along with some of the other notes that have come out of the pneumatic tube. He unravels it, and the note says, I love you. And so, again, this note that says, I love you, it could be a trap, right? To say I love you to somebody, those are very, very strong words. And for 2 people that have never met before, and not only have never met before, but to receive a note like that from somebody who Winston actually just a chapter ago considered killing with the coral paperweight, the message of I love you is incredibly suspicious. However, it doesn't actually take Winston very long to believe that she is somebody that can be trusted. And so, of course, if we were talking about this in class, I would ask, well, why do you think that is? Why do you think he's able to trust her so easily after, for 8 chapters, all we've learned about is how much he doesn't trust her, about how much he actually fears her, to the point of actually wanting to murder her. And so I think the reasoning for Winston being able to trust Julia so easily is because, as I've repeated over and over again, this is 30 years that Winston has lived under this regime. And he is so desperate to connect with somebody. He's desperate for anything that gives him some hope. And we've seen that all throughout the first part of the novel, right? He believes in his dreams, any kind of gut feeling that he gets. Even the coral paperweight provides him with hope. The Brotherhood provides him with hope. Emmanuel Goldstein provides him with hope that that man is out there somewhere leading some sort of rebellion against Big Brother. He's looking to sort of grasp onto anything. And so this note of "I love you," it gives him hope that he's finally got somebody. He's finally got somebody on his side. Now I'm getting a phone call from my aunt, and that's because it's my birthday. And so I kind of knew that this was going to happen, but obviously I can't answer it, and I feel so bad about that. But it's all good, and she'll forgive me. So yeah. This "I love you" note, it provides him. It certainly provides him with. Hope. Now, the next step, of course, for Winston is to try and figure out how they can meet and talk to each other. And as you can imagine, that's a difficult thing to do. Just like after the 2 minutes hate, when he made that eye contact with O'Brien, it was sort of that look of the eyes between them is a bit inconsequential because they're not able to freely chat with each other anyway. And so again, Winston was no further ahead than he was before. And it's the same thing here. He receives this "I love you" note, but what's he supposed to really do? Right? You can't go running up to her, right, and say, "Hey, you just, you said that you love me, right? So now what?" You can't do that. And so he's just got to wait for the right moment for them to have a conversation with each other. And this is actually kind of, not overly comedic, not like haha funny, but he actually has to wait a really, really long time before they're actually able to. And someone just flushed the toilet. I can hear it. He actually has to wait a really long time before he's able to speak with her freely. Because, again, if you read the chapter well enough, you know that their conversations are very, very short. To the point where it's just they get out just a few little bits of information and then that's it. And so what I mean by Winston having to wait a while, like I said, if you read the chapter well enough, he receives the "I love you" note. The very next day, he expects to kind of meet with her in the canteen. Somebody just flushed the toilet again? How many times do you have to flush a toilet? So let's say day one, he receives the "I love you" note. Let's just do this. Then the next day, what did I write down here? Then the next day, he plans to chat with her in the lunchroom, and she doesn't appear in the lunchroom until his lunch is over. So they kind of pass by each other. It says they don't even make eye contact or anything like that. The day after that, we're now on, say, day 3. She's in the lunchroom at the same time as him, but she's already sitting with 3 other girls and under a telescreen, so that's not going to work. Then he says for 3 days after that, days 4, 5, and 6, she doesn't appear at all. And actually makes him quite worried. And it's one of those things where he's worried that if too much time passes, what happens if she changes her mind? And so he's worried that if he doesn't make a connection with her soon, that maybe she'll regret giving him the note. Then it finally, I think, happens on day 7 or day 8. When he is heading towards her table, the man in front of him trips and falls, and thankfully Winston is able to head to her table and chat with her. And again, if you know that conversation, it doesn't. It's not a conversation that lasts for very long. Very, very quickly, they have to come up with a plan of when they're going to meet. And they decide that they're going to meet at 7 o'clock, 1900 hours. They're going to meet at 7 o'clock in the evening at a place called Victory Square. And Victory Square is, of course, the renamed version of Trafalgar Square, which is in central London. And it's a real place, but of course has been renamed to Victory Square, and that's where they're going to meet. So very, very quickly, when they sit at the same table next to each other, very, very quickly, not even making eye contact with each other, they come up with this very, very brief plan of, or briefly come up with a plan of when they're going to meet with each other. And so that's going to happen, I think, the very next day. And so they do. Julia wants to meet in a place that is public and a place that is crowded, and so that way they can speak to each other without maybe being overheard by any microphones. And certainly if there's a crowd of people, it'll be perfect because their voices will be obviously a lot quieter. No one will, of course, really pick up on what it is that they're saying to each other, even though they still have to be very careful. So yeah, they put that plan into action, and again, depending on how invested you are in the novel, you can be reading into this in a couple of different ways. You may still think that Julia is trying to trap him, that maybe she is a member of the Thought Police, or maybe you're like Winston. You very easily are able to trust Julia. What she's done so far is enough for you to kind of buy in that she is somebody that he can trust and be friends with, be allied with. So when they meet at Victory Square, it just so happens that there's a convoy of Eurasian prisoners that have been captured. The convoy goes by, a whole bunch of people, like a whole crowd of people, end up kind of going by, seemingly following the convoy of these Eurasian prisoners. And so in the middle, Winston and Julia kind of worm in the middle of these people, this massive crowd, and again are able to have this very, very quick conversation to make another plan of when they can meet and discuss and speak freely. So the chapter kind of ends with again this kind of fragmented conversation going back and forth about when they're supposed to meet up with each other, when and where. Julia seems to know of a place where they can meet and speak openly and freely. And so she gives Winston these directions on how to get there. And they're going to, I don't know what day it is currently for them, but this meeting is going to take place on Sunday afternoon, I think 2 or 3 in the afternoon on Sunday. And so Winston is going to follow Julia's directions to meet up in this place. And because the crowd, I think it actually says the crowd hem them in, meaning the crowd kind of pushes them together, and they give each other's hand just a nice little squeeze, goodbye, and then they go their separate ways. And that's really it for chapter 1. And so in part 2 here, you're going to see that Winston is going to make some progress in at least having somebody else on his side, so he's not really alone. And that's what it's going to seem like, and we're going to have to sort of figure out if Julia is somebody that Winston can trust or not. But I think that's it. So as always, if you have any questions, then please let me know. But otherwise, I hope the video was helpful, and we'll see you soon.